Fellow citizens of Earth, have you ever felt more part of a global community? Have you ever felt more repelled away from people by social distancing? Look at the new vocabulary we're learning: social distancing, flatten the curve, epidemiologist, virologist, is that right? I never knew these words like 2-3 days ago. My own personal trajectory from glib and dismissive to I might be able to use this as an excuse to get out of things I don't want to do, to this is a serious catastrophe. I've always been a slow learner. Has there been anything in living memory simultaneously so big and so small? Of course there's been disasters, earthquakes, tidal waves that have caused more fatalities and in some ways more damage. Also there's been cataclysmic events like 9/11. But has there been anything simultaneously so big and so small, so globally big that whether you're in Kenya or Australia or England or Spain or California, you're going to be affected by this, but so small that you have the experience of being in a supermarket or looking at your own bank balance? I'm aware that I'm in a privileged position comparatively, but that hierarchy of privilege is a broad and long spectrum. Please God, countries without adequate healthcare are exposed to these risks. What I'm primarily interested in, given that I'm not a medical expert, a mathematician, a virologist, an immunologist, or any of the other things, is the social, psychological, and spiritual impact of a truly global phenomena. Some of the things that I wanted to talk about with you include the herd immunity idea and its detractors, the fact that we are going to be governed by people at a time when there's an incredible lack of trust in government. In a sense, the reality, even as we understand it as lay people, is, oh, this is a highly contagious thing. It's having a massive economic impact. No one knows what to do because it's to a degree unprecedented. And we have got to work out the distinction between necessary centralized power around medicine, law and order, justice, distribution, and the necessary localized power that's been so neglected. One of the things I've been thinking about is how exposed we are to abstract systems. I mean, I know economics is real. Like if suddenly everything that I own was suddenly wiped with a sort of the pressing of a button, which suddenly seems plausible, I would consider it real. But we have airlines that can't contend with the ethos of their own system. Like airlines are asking for bailouts, and do we want to live in a world where there are no airlines? Well, that's another question. Suddenly it seems that there is a question mark over the idea of essential travel, non-essential travel, the kind of like adjustments that ecologically minded people have been considering for a while are now being imposed, self-imposed, self-isolation. Like most of you, I've got people that I'm directly concerned about. Like my mother can't get this. I've got other family members that can't get this. It's an extraordinary time. It's an extraordinary time. The things that I'm most interested in is what can we learn from this? From a program perspective, as a man that lives with a program, the way that these things must be approached, I'm talking about for my own psychological survival, but I reckon it's analogous to sociological and even global survival, is one, the acknowledgement of a problem, two, the belief that a problem can be solved, three, that the problem can't be solved individually but perhaps can be collectively, four, that we need to really understand it, inventory it, share information and trust experts in individual fields. And I don't just mean individual fields such as medicine and immunology. I mean other fields, sociological, behavioural. Think about how many of the impositions that are being discussed are behavioural. Like in the UK, for example, we don't want to impose gathering restrictions yet in case people have fatigue. I'm fatigued of not getting coronavirus now. As that letter to the government from that body of scientists said, what's the data that suggests that there will be behavioural fatigue? What's the data that suggests that this is a good way of flattening out the curve? In Italy, at the time of recording this, there'd been a 25% increase, and Italy are further down the narrative line than we are. That's with the assumption that there is one narrative line. The information is coming so quickly. The changes are happening so rapidly. What I'm most curious about is the way that it challenges our ideas about community, economics, social economic systems that clearly can't hold themselves together. It seems like, did you watch the Bill Gates TED talk where he says, like, looking at when he looked at Ebola and SARS and said, if there's another global epidemic, this is what it might look like, and we should have preparatory measures in place the same way as we would militarily for conflicts. We've got trained armies, etc. It poses some interesting questions about biopolitics. The thing that I return to is the idea that we are out of touch with nature, our own nature, and nature more broadly. That for hundreds of thousands of years we lived as hunter-gatherers in groups of 75 to 150 people, and our closest relatives in the primate world split at around 200. I wonder if we lived in a confederacy of tribal groups. There obviously needs to be centralization, as I mentioned at the beginning, around judiciary, medical issues, etc. But the confederacy applies that. Imagine if we lived in tribal groups where we shared, where we looked after one another. It seems like this is like the echoes of our origins are being heard on the wind, are being carried microbiologically. You can't live in abstract economic systems. You can't just do what you want. You can't limitlessly consume. The way that it feels when our cathedrals of consumerism are laid bare, the empty, breadless, riceless shelves, and you realize, oh, this is invisibly held together by systems that we don't think about. Like Zaya Tong said, everything is filmed today except where our food comes from, where our energy comes from, and where our waste goes. Everything else you can look at on Instagram. Everything else can be seen. Well, now the unconscious world is surging up. We're being invited to go within. Did you check that verse from the Tao that I posted? It's like, in ancient wisdom, these things are understood. Whilst this is unprecedented for civilizations of this civilization, this is somehow deeply understood in the areas of expertise which must be granted preeminence along with the areas of expertise in medicine and science, which must be heralded, must be heard, must be listened to. We must listen also to the ancient wisdom. We must listen to the truth within. What are we being shown? What are we being taught about what is important to us, about who we can trust, about what values we have? Who governs us? Is this how we want to be governed? What is the value of a nation state? What is the value of commercial capitalism if when nature surges back, it falls apart? As Osho said, and I know Osho was a man who had some complexity, Osho said, what is civilization? Civilization is just a clearing in the forest. Have you ever felt that more strongly? Have you ever felt more that the forest could close in? I use the forest as a metaphor for nature herself, that in the microbiotic subparticular world, forces can emerge and reclaim that which we believe but knew in our heart of hearts wasn't permanent. Some interesting things that I've observed. The herd immunity policy seems to be somewhat driven by kind of sort of the social Darwinistic survival of the fittest methodology, reliant on self-isolation, which is like a peculiar thing. Like what? We're just going to rely on our nans and granddads and people with respiratory conditions to sort of self-isolate while 40, 50, 60 million people contract this thing, develop a herd immunity for which there is no precedent as far as I understand because it's a novel virus, and hope that those vulnerable people don't catch it. It's interesting to confront that level of powerlessness. The airlines and manufacturing industries asking for bailouts. Oh, I see. So there is such a thing as society. There is such a thing as welfare and social care. We can't just survive on the principles of the market will decide, because look at what happens to the market when nature, or whatever this is, I know some people question the provenance of this condition, but that's in a sense always going to be speculative. In any event, it's here now, and the havoc that it's wreaking, it's difficult to see how one centralized body, be it pharmaceutical or otherwise, would benefit in a way that's tangible. We've invented the vaccine, let's release the virus. Oh my fucking God! Difficult to imagine how that idea would work. More important, I think, is the acknowledgement that, oh wow, we're all connected to one another. We need to look after one another, whether it's airlines or individual people that can't take care of themselves. An airline asking for a bailout is exactly identical as an individual person saying, I can't look after myself, my mental health or my physical health isn't good enough for me to work. Aren't we all connected? How are we allowing this? Because, see, the argument against welfare has always been, no, if you want to survive, you've got to survive in these systems using your moxie, your canniness, your ability to survive. Well, look what happens when a society receives a moment of crisis in the same way that many individuals already have done. You have to ask for help. You have to suspend the rules of the game of capitalism and ask for help. Lessons to be learned there. Who is not inspired by Jurgen Klopp's philosophical attitude to Liverpool's first title in 30 years? That football is the most important of the least important things. It's not worth one single person getting sick. Wouldn't you rather have Jurgen Klopp running the country, whatever country you're in, than the person that currently runs your country? What a guy, Jurgen Klopp. Who would have thought, you know? And like football is important, and it's an interesting rupture in the system. It's interesting. Oh no, football is just imaginary. It's just a game with rules that, you know, a snap of the fingers, it's over. How many other social systems are similarly held together in the conceptual mind? I would argue there are many economic ones. Where the panic lands, is it toilet rolls or is it guns? Look how primal our instincts are. Look at what we fixate on when it comes to crunch time. My contribution to this conversation is simply, what is it that can be controlled? What can we learn from this? How can we go within? How can we accept this changing world? How can we deal with the grief and mourning of this rapidly changing situation? None of us know if in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months things are going to settle down. None of us know what's going to happen in China when social distancing laws are removed. We don't know the uncertainty of this, and yet we never knew. I urge you, check that verse 80 of the Tao, where with ancient prophecy they talk of now, where they say the ever-changing world, always changing, always altering. If you have no relationship with the deep voice within, this is going to be difficult and challenging. I'm like you, I'm feeling the same thing. Some degree of fear, but wisdom fear, hopefully, rather than neurotic fear. Neurotic fear, hoard toilet rolls. Wisdom fear, wash your hands, stay awake, stay aware. Think about how you're going to reorder your life. Think about how you're going to be economically impacted. Think about what your values are. I'm there like you. I don't have any answers. The only thing that I have any certainty around is that now more than ever we must look inside ourselves and in relationship behave honorably and with integrity and grace towards one another. I'm going to continue to do these videos on the global, individual, sociological and spiritual impact of coronavirus. Subscribe here to the YouTube channel. You know, I do that podcast on Luminary. If you want it, I'm going to try and put out content whenever I can. I hope you are okay. If you have questions, stick them in the comments below. If you have comments, stick them in the questions below. And wow, look after yourself, and let's accumulate knowledge together and distribute power as best we can. Power is information.